Hello guys, welcome to Dr. Science. So today our topic is about dural venous sinus. So in order to understand this concept, I would like to tell about the meninges first. So usually we have three meninges, right? One is the dura mater, one is the arachnoid mater, and the third one is your pia mater. So this dura mater is divided into two layers. Don't worry, I will draw the diagram. But first listen here. One is the endosteal layer, which is the outer part, and other one is your meningeal layer, which is your inner part. So let's draw the diagram here. So suppose this is the outermost part, which is your skull bone. To this skull bone there is a layer which is tightly adherent to it. Okay, this layer which is tightly adherent to the skull bone is your endosteal layer. Okay, now there is another layer which is adherent to the meninges below. As you know that there are meninges below the dura mater, which is the arachnoid mater, right? This layer which is adherent to the arachnoid layer is called as your meningeal layer. Okay, so dura mater is divided into two layers. One is the endosteal layer, which is adherent to the skull bone, right? Whereas meningeal layer, it is adherent to the meninges below. That's why it is called as the meningeal layer. Now in between the two layers there is this sinus. Can you see the sinus here? Now what is meant by a sinus? Sinus is nothing but it is an empty space. Okay, and in this empty space the veins of the cerebral cortex, okay, the veins of the cerebral cortex will drain the venous blood. Okay, so in the sinus what is happening, the veins of cerebral cortex will drain the blood there, which is the venous blood. Hence it is called as a venous sinus. Since it is present between the two layers of the dura mater, it is called as a dural venous sinus. Okay, once again, dural venous sinus is nothing but a space. Okay, it is a space in between the endosteal layer and the meningeal layer, in which the cerebral veins will drain the blood, which is your venous blood. Okay, so that was about our dural venous sinus. Now how the dural venous sinuses are arranged in our brain, we are going to see. Okay, so imagine this is a superior sagittal sinus. What is this? Superior sagittal sinus. Usually our dural venous sinus are 8 paired sinuses and 7 unpaired sinuses. Okay, so we are going to see what are the components there. So here is a superior sagittal sinus, and below is your inferior sagittal sinus, and these two sinuses are draining into a sinus called as your straight sinus. And not only that, there is another sinus which is coming and draining into this sinus. This sinus is present backside, hence it is called as your occipital sinus. Okay, I hope you understand the concept here. Superior, inferior and the occipital sinus are draining into the straight sinus. Hence, this straight sinus is sometimes also called as your great cerebral vein of Gall. Okay, so straight sinus is nothing but great cerebral vein of Gall. Now, eventually, from this straight sinus, there appears to be a transverse sinus. This sinus here is a transverse sinus, and from transverse sinus there will be another sinus which is a S-shaped sinus, or we can simply call it as the sigmoid sinus. Okay, I hope you understand this concept. Now from here, as you can see here, this sinus here is called as your cavernous sinus. I will discuss about cavernous sinus in a detailed video. Please wait for that one. So from the cavernous sinus there is a sinus coming which is called as your inferior petrosal sinus. So from cavernous sinus there is a sinus draining which is your inferior petrosal sinus. Now the sigmoid sinus together with your cavernous sinus enters a foramen, and that foramen is nothing but your jugular foramen. Okay, from that point, from the jugular point, jugular foramen, they will fuse and form the internal jugular vein. Okay, in exams if they ask what are the sinuses responsible for formation of internal jugular vein, it is nothing but your inferior petrosal sinus plus your sigmoid sinus. So these together are getting fused and forming the internal jugular vein. So I hope you get this sinus part clearly. So once again, the superior sagittal sinus, and the inferior sagittal sinus eventually drain into the straight sinus, and the straight sinus will drain into the transverse will drain into sigmoid will fuse with the inferior petrosal sinus and forms the internal jugular vein. Okay, if you are clear with this topic, then let's see this diagram which is taken from the anatomy textbook. So as you can see here, this is the superior sagittal sinus, and this is the inferior sagittal sinus. And eventually, as you can see here is the cavernous sinus. All of them will fuse and form the internal jugular vein. So here is your internal jugular vein. I hope you understand this concept. Thank you guys.